Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the podcast on the Sicha. Today we're going to be learning and bringing the Sicha and Likutei Sichas Chelek Chaf Tes, Sicha Tetze Aleph, the first Sicha. I'm here together with my friend Moshe Gurari from Tom's River and Yisrael Willem from Boulder, Colorado. Today we're talking about an interesting topic of mixtures, of bringing things together, the harmony of the world, everything being so beautiful and blended. It seems like the most utopian idea, yet the Torah tells us that certain things should remain separate. And specifically, we're talking about the idea of kalayim. Three things that we're talking about specifically is when it comes to vegetation and planting and keeping species separate, as well when it comes to animals. And then, of course, something that we deal with on a regular basis, which is what we refer to as shatnez, and when it comes to clothing, mixing wool and linen, and so on. But to unpack it, talk about a little bit the background and what is the context of the conversation, again, we'll turn it over to Moshe to bring us up to speed.
Okay, actually, a very, very fascinating sikha. I think one of the fascinating details about it is the fact that we know that there's a concept of chukim, statutes, which are mitzvahs that were given to us without a reason. Here we discover that even though the Torah doesn't give a reason for it, there is a whole behind the scenes in this world, in the spiritual worlds, and even the chukim, they actually have reasons, and the things we're told to do or told to not do, actually there is a counter effect, or there is an effect rather, from the things that we do that is vital to our understanding of a specific mitzvah. That's just one of the things that I found so fascinating. Say shatnez, Hashem said so, fine. Anyway, but I have to first take you through the sikha. So as Shmuley mentioned, we're looking at three types of kilayim: not mixing wool and linen, not crossbreeding different animal species, and not grafting different types of plants. The underlying question in the sikha, or the foundational question of the sikha, is why, when it comes to wool and linen, do we find that we're allowed to have wool and linen in tzitzis, and we find that in the garments of the kohen there was a blend of wool and linen. And then once we establish the question, the Rebbe says, let's first understand this whole concept of kilayim. And the first thing we do is we establish the Ramban, who says the problem with kilayim is that it goes against the nature of creation. That Hashem created livestock and vegetation, that it should procreate and carry on the species. But when you crossbreed two animals and a new type, odd type of species is created, this goes against the order of creation. So that's the Ramban. And that would apply mostly to animals and to agriculture, not so much to wool and linen. Then the Rebbe brings in the Rabbeinu Bechaya, who says that it's not just a problem in this physical world that you're going against the order of creation. Actually, in the spiritual world, you're also playing with mixtures that are not supposed to happen. And immediately the Rebbe asks the question: when you learn Chassidus, you know that mixtures are great and peace is beautiful. Like taking two things that are different or even opposite and fusing them together and blending them together is like the utopia of the world, and also in the spiritual worlds. Why all of a sudden are we so afraid of it? And the Rebbe explains something so fundamental. The Rebbe says that when it's something that's holy, something that Hashem is involved, where the creations feel a bittul, a surrender to the ultimate will of Hashem, then other differences don't matter so much, because what matters more is what unites them, which is their dedication to Hashem. But when it is a physical thing, in the physical world, where they're lacking that surrender, that dedication, then it becomes about them. And then that creates conflict. That is something that doesn't work well. So that answers the question of why mixtures are bad, because if you have a mixture of two opposites without the unifying factor of their dedication to Hashem, it actually creates a bad mixture. So now let's go back to, should we pause here for a second? Because I'm talking for a long time. Let's stop for a second and let's see if there's something we could open up. No, it's too soon.
No, I mean, this question that the Rebbe asks is a very powerful question. I think the question that you said on the Rebbeinu Bechaya about what's wrong with mixing two opposites, especially when it's spiritual opposites, chesed and gvura. You know, in other words, the skalulus, the concept of uniting yourself and being one, and not being all over the place, and whatever you want to do on a personal level, on a global level, on a family level. What's wrong with the skalulus of just everybody just seemingly getting along or removing their just moving the identity in order to make space for somebody else. It seems very nice and very positive, and that's, I mean, and that don't we demand that, and the answer that it's there's a lot to talk about, things that we could say, things we could talk about, things we shouldn't talk about, but the idea that there's a system in place. The Abisher, Hashem, puts a system in place. He makes certain people this way and certain people that way. Certain personalities are like this and certain personalities like that. Certain creations are with this, and so it's that's just how it is. And you cannot beat the system. You can try as hard as you want to try and create an equality that goes beyond that system, but it's not realistic. It's impossible to change. That's just the reality of the world. And that's why you can try and mix these two, but it's climb. It's not going to work. It's only going to work when it's related to kedusha, when it's bittul, when there's something, when you're doing it because Hashem allows you to bring it together. When Hashem, when you're looking from Hashem's perspective, then you have the ability to bring it together. This we have to bring about to explain a little bit more.
So I think we'll get to that. Once the Rebbe once we share a little bit more of the breakdown. I think though for now, I think just this very concept that there is conflict that doesn't work, and then there's differences that do work, and the key is bittul, or the key is kedusha. I think that in itself is something that we may want to just focus on for a moment. The idea that we don't have to be the same in order for us to work together. We don't have to, always be identical to each other in order for there to be achtos, or whatever term you want to use. There is a concept in Kedusha, and as the Rebbe brings the example of Michael and Gavriel, the Michael was the angel of fire, angel of water, of Chesed, and Gavriel was the angel of fire, of Gvura, that they're not meant to give up their differences. They're meant to retain their differences, but at the same time to work hand in hand, like by the Barad, like by the plague of hail, where it was fire and ice together. It wasn't like they became a mush. And the same concept is where when Hashem created us, He created each person with unique milas. If everybody in this group, three of us together, we work on a project together. If the three of us were exactly the same, Project Likutei Sichos would have never happened, because either we would have had too much of this or too much of that and not enough of that. The fact that we're different and we each contributed something to a greater goal is what made it happen. So differences, and this is something that I think I'm talking a lot. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop in a second, just to let someone else speak. But differences are not bad. Differences are actually good, as long as there is a guiding point to utilize those differences. Okay.
I think that to just put it in different words, people often ask, does Judaism believe in equality? Because we use that word. It's a very popular word that's thrown around today. And on the outset, it's almost impossible to answer and say no, because you're canceled. How could you say such a thing? What does that even mean? And mostly you talk to it, but really I think the way to explain it is that Yiddishkeit believes in individuality. And individuality means, like you said, that everybody has their identity. And now we're talking within, let's say, within humanity even. And the broader picture here, obviously, of the Sicha is within creation on a larger scope. Recognizing the individual identity, function, purpose of being of every item, of everything, of every person. And when you recognize that, at the moment you say, no, we want to blend that and we want everybody to be the same, obviously, everybody should have equal opportunity. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about identity. We're talking about perspective. We're talking about emotion. We're talking about, what you bring to the table and who you are and your talents, and whether it's in business or whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a partnership, whatever the relationship that we're talking about. The value that we're saying here is that Hashem created every being and everything the way it's supposed to be and where it's supposed to be. And the beauty of that picture is when each of those colors, when each of those items, when each of those people, when each of those things bring that to the canvas, bring that to the painting, bring that to the picture, and that's the utopian picture. And the moment you start mixing those up and you start changing them because we want every for whatever reason, for creative reasons, for exploratory reasons, um, you're doing a disservice to the individual identity of whatever it is that individual is. I think that it also speaks to the idea of conflict. It's a very, very interesting sikha because, like Yisrael was saying, like really, we always talk in Chassidus about shalom. Yaveh Yakasva Shlishi v'Yachriya Beinehem. You always bring the third in and bring the Eibusher in, and always shalom and always peace. And it almost feels like in this sikha, on the outset, it's like everybody stay in your lane. Everybody stay in your lane, and there's almost something to be said about wishing the other well, not having negative feelings, not having, anxiety, anger, animosity, any, and wishing, but it doesn't necessarily, on the contrary, if you're trying to bring two opposites together, when they are opposites, you're not actually going to be doing a favor to anyone or anything around. You're actually going to be creating more separation and more problem and more confusion within the purpose of creation. And it's very contrary to like the classic standard way of learning of always bringing peace and always bringing those in conflict together.
I would say that's also just an important reminder of speaking of the classic interpretation of bittul that we have in general, that in this sikha very much defines what real bittul is. So when you like the example that we bought before, that was said before about Gavriel, Michal Gavriel, or Mayim and Aish, the purpose when they're standing in front of Hashem, when we're standing in front of Kedusha, is not that bittul means that I lose my identity. It's like, which is a class, which we grew up in, just have bittul and do whatever. Listen, no, bittul is bringing along, maintaining your identity within the fact that there's something much greater than you. So like as a chassid, you're standing in front of the Rebbe, and obviously you do whatever the Rebbe wants, but you maintain who you are. I know just a story that maybe I've shared before. I don't think on this podcast, but someone anyway, a yid who went into the Rebbe once, and he had different options of shluchas. And he passed away. Anyway, he had different options of shluchas, and he saw that he was already on shluchas, and he didn't like it, and he had better options. He came in. And he saw before by Ma'ariv that the Rebbe was very sick. The Rebbe wasn't feeling well. So he said to himself, the Rebbe is here going to take a chiddush all night, and I'm bothering the Rebbe with this and that. What, am I crazy? So he ripped up his letter that he had written to the Rebbe to give to the Rebbe chiddush. And he walked in and he told the Rebbe, Ich will haben bittul haratzen, which means in English, whatever the Rebbe wants, I'll do. The Rebbe said, but bittul haratzen is doch toit. Like whatever I want. Like
Translate.
Yeah. Just saying like I'll do whatever you want. It's dead. It's emotionless. It's no feeling. It's not who you are. You got to bring yourself along for the ride. You got to bring yourself. I want to hear, what do you want? Give me your struggles. You want this, you want that. Obviously, he was doing it because he felt bad. But the Rebbe wanted to hear, his name. I'm saying it's important. Just you said like the misconceptions of shalom and misconception of bittul. Like just having bittul in the unhealthy sense. That's climb. That's just making it all one. Anyway, just to add.
Not everything goes into the cholent.
Exactly.
Not everything. A lot could go in, but not everything.
Yeah.
Now I'll give two more short examples, and then I'll move the sikha forward. There's a very famous, not very famous. There's a well-known sikha of the Rebbe about Vayakel and Pkude. Vayakel means to gather. Pkude means to count, which means that every individual is counted. So the Rebbe says seemingly it's two opposites. Vayakel means it's one cholent. Pkude means it's all individuals. And the Rebbe says that is the true way of making a gathering where each one retains their individual identity and yet they're all together as one. In other words, not by one of the examples that's given, the difference between a salad and a soup. That in a soup, or in a cholent, you don't see each different kind. In a salad, you could see a cucumber, you could see a tomato, and it's more tasty, it's more delicious when it's all together. But still, you could still identify each individual one. Another more classic example is each v'isha zachu shechina shruya b'neihem. That in a marriage, there's an isha, and when there's proper shalom between them, then you have the Shekhinah as well, which means that the beautiful way of a marriage is not that the man should be a woman and the woman should be a man, or that they should confuse their individual roles, but fakir, they should retain their individual roles and then bring shalom between them, and ultimately that's the way. Going back to the Sicha for a moment, this is just step one. This idea that there is a shalom that works, there are differences that could actually be beneficial when there is a greater good, so to speak, is only one step. The Rebbe takes it another step. And the Rebbe says that sometimes shalom, even good shalom, is actually a bad shalom. Which means to say that sometimes you have two things that are different, you bring them together and they create peace. But the peace is being utilized to go against creation, to go against the Abish's creation. The example would be when you have two different species of animals that are being mated with each other and giving birth to a brand new species that isn't part of Hashem's creation. That's the example of the Sicha. But we could talk about more practical, more personal examples. But the idea is that you created peace. Shalom. We need peace. But on what cheshbon? If the peace is leading to breaking the order of creation, then that's not a peace that's wanted. And therefore, there's no way in halacha that kile behema, the mixture of livestock or the mixture in agriculture, could ever be mutter. Because
it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work ever.
I think it's worthwhile just to take a quick parenthesis for a lot of people in the world worry today, and rightfully so, about all the anti-Semitism that's going on, that we see on the streets, that we see in the demonstrations from the right and from the left and in between with what's going on in Israel, and it's worrisome. And I think you could apply this concept on a view. Obviously, we could take it personal to ourselves, and we shouldn't just learn a sikha to say, to learn about someone else. But it's the same idea that when you have, these different entities from wherever their thought processes are coming and their political spectrum and whatever it is, and their common denominator is hate, is anti-Semitism, and so on. We could take comfort in knowing that it's against my and it's not a shalom, which is a davar shebekadosh, and you already see it, and something like that will not have a kiyum. I mean, it definitely could do a lot of destruction in the way, and it will, because it's going against kedusha, it's going against holiness, it's going against the type of merging that could work. So it can't work. That doesn't mean it can't hurt, and it can't create havoc in the process. But spiritually and fundamentally, it's comforting for us to know that doesn't work. And to call it out for what it is, or to at least understand it between ourselves and look at it and understand it that way, that you see these groups of people that are coming together under the one banner. There is no one banner. There's 100 banners, and in 2 seconds they would kill each other, and they will. Do
you know what the ironic but the ironic outcome of the Sicha is? Conflict is fixable. Conflict could be harnessed for good. But peace, the wrong kind of peace, there's no hope.
It's
Think
almost
about
worse.
it. It's much worse. It's much worse. Oh, he's saying
Explain that.
shalom, abi shalom.
So explain that in the Sicha.
What?
Explain that in the Sicha to answer the difference. Why one is allowed, why is not allowed.
So the Rebbe says in the Sicha that when it comes to kile behema, kile karka, like I was saying before, which when you mate them together or graft them together, the species ends. There's procreation, but brand new things are being introduced that are not part of Hashem's world. If that's the outcome, then there's no way of doing so, and therefore there's no heter, even for a carbon, even for holiness, to mix together behemoths and or karka. But when it comes to garments, where we said before that the wool and the linen, it's not a full mixture. They each retain their identity, and the problem is that when each retains their identity, there is a conflict. But if that mixture is being used for kedusha, then the conflict goes away, and the holiness, the kedusha of Hashem, or the bittul to Hashem, it harnesses the conflict or the differences for the good, and which is why dafke by begadim, by garments, is there permissibility when there's a case of kedusha for tzitzis or for the big dikuna, for the garments of the kohen. So as Shmuley was just speaking, I realized, that we always say shalom is better. I mean, we always think shalom is better than machlokes.
Right. And actually, when I learned the Sicha in Oy Zion, for those who will look inside, the last line of Oy Zion is that the problem with shatness is werd von ze chibur ve'ivruv atitzah hefches and in from period of machlokes. Right? Because of machlokes, I was wondering at that point, what's worse? Is it worse period of machlokes because that's the expression, or is it worse that they lose identity? Like Gabriel won't be Gabriel. But then when the Rebbe says that period of machlokes, the shatness can be allowed in kedusha, and it's a practical thing. Two people are fighting, and there's real machlokes. You know what I mean? You're fighting with you in the shalom bayis with your kids, whatever it is. A situation where there's people who are in conflict, but they're expressing it. They're talking about it. They're obviously not in a lashon hara way. In between each other, they really disagree. The only change is when they realize that there's a bigger picture. Whatever the bigger picture, the Ibrisher, it's there's something bigger. To everybody that would mean something else. The situation is different, and it's very individual. The situation. I'm not going to give an example, but that's fine. But when the shatness becomes, when the irbu becomes, it's just something totally. You lose who you are in order to get along. You're like, you know what? I'm just not going to be. I'm just going to give up, and you throw the towel in, and I'm not. Then it's hopeless. It's hopeless in a marriage. It's hopeless in anything. It's hopeless in getting along with your neighbor. It's hopeless in so many different situations. You're not allowing a kedusha to come into that situation. It's a very powerful thing. I mean, there's a lot to bring here about what you said. This line, period of machlokes, or just losing who you are.
There's an interesting thing here where the Rebbe brings in Ha'ara 39, talking about the reason for kalayim, which we talk about chukim and no reason, but I just found it very interesting, just in connection to what we're talking about. The Rebbe says here that so going to the spiritual dimension, because we've been talking very much emotionally and physically and about the inner workings of reality and creation, the way Hashem created it, but there's also a ruach aspect to everything. And I just to bring another angle to the conversation, sometimes you could be talking to someone, you could be meeting someone, someone could approach you. Certainly, on Shlichus, you encounter this type of thing, whether it's another leader of another community or someone else or whatever it is. And there's a, you could in a certain way find commonality. You could almost say, like, we're the same. We have similar ideals. You could find a common energy. They're energetic like you. They want to do good in the world. But also you have to ask yourself, what are these two ruachs that are coming together? And spiritually speaking, it doesn't work if it's a ruach hakdusha and a ruach hatuma. even though sometimes it may feel good, like we started off talking about at the beginning, it may feel good, it may sound good. On paper, it looks like the most beautiful thing. I mean, how many times do we get emails from all over about seminars,
Collaboration.
yeah, collaboration and everything else, and everything sounds right. But the question is, what does it mean to your identity? What does it mean to your purpose here? What does it mean to my Bereshis? What does it mean to creation? What does it mean to why you were created? It doesn't take away from them. It's nothing to do. It doesn't put anybody down. But it does say that there's an individual mission that everybody has, every single person here. And not always is it the right thing to just because the ruach, but the spirituality of it maybe doesn't mesh. And if it doesn't mesh, the biggest piece you could have is to have those spiritual energies working, doing what they need to do, doing good things in the world in their own domain, in their own identity.
I'll end off just one thing, just one takeaway about this shinui b'maisa bereshis, the change of maisa bereshis in a practical, personal sense. To me, is that we're each given our strength, that's our maisa bereshis. That's how Hashem created us with our ability to do good. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't push ourselves and go further, but the second you need to change who you are in order, to totally change, to nullify bittul, whatever it is in any situation, and take away your identity just for the sake of getting along and whatever, you're tashinu b'ma'aser bereshis. That is something that it's very difficult to change. It's very difficult to it shouldn't be done. You realize that the koiches, the strength that Hashem gave you, is very real. That's what Hashem expects from you, who you are, to make a difference in this world and to be a leader in your situation, and not to mess with that, not to put it away for someone else. I know we speak a lot about this, but it's mamish what the Rebbe is saying over here. It's very clear. Sometimes I just want to say in a positive way. I one time heard two people who really didn't get along, really, for real, for many, many years. And I heard them yelling and screaming at each other in an unbelievable way. But they were doing it just in order, because they were trying to get along at the end. And now they're best friends. Now they're best friends. They had to just a period of machloikas just needs a little switch. But if you knock yourself out of who you are and who the other person is, then there's no hope. Then you die enemies. You know what I mean? It's cold, but it's a cold war. There's nothing to give. Anyway, that's my l'chaim for today.
I think my conclusionary remarks is very similar to what you're saying. I'm going to use the word shmata. To not make a shmata out of yourself. In other words, a lot of times, for the sake of supposed shalom, you let things go. You let things, whether it's ideas of policy as a shliach or as a Chabad chassid, or whether it's a situation that you're going through someone and you say, you know what, I don't want to fight this, so I'm going to let the other person get their way and get along for the sake of shalom. So sometimes that's the most beautiful sentiment. Why should I fight this? And sometimes it's the wrongest thing that you could do, because you're making yourself into a shmata. You're letting yourself get stepped on. And if you think about it, in a marriage, it doesn't work. If you lose your metzias, then the spouse has no one to be with. The spouse is not looking for someone that's just going to not be there, or not bring their all. They want someone of, sometimes they'll butt heads. But that's because when there's two full-fledged people, like there's a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Zalman Zezmer, he used to say to his Yetzer Hara, you're trying to convince me to do an Aveda? You know who I am? I'm a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. When we make a shmata out of ourselves, whatever that means for you, you're basically saying to the Eivishter, this was a defected creation. You created a person that doesn't have the keiches to fight, doesn't have the keiches to stand up for himself. I'm a shmata. As a chelek of our faith in Hashem and the fact that Hashem needs us to represent Him in this world, we have an obligation. We have an obligation to sometimes to not make peace with a matzav, to not make peace with something else or someone else that wants to destroy our uniqueness. So on the one hand, there is an obviously an incredible advantage to shalom. Usually that is when kedusha is involved and when bittul is involved, etc., etc. But then there is always and this I think is like the more unique message of the Sicha is that as a child of the Eibishter, as a creation of the Eibishter, you have an obligation to yourself and to your Creator to not make peace with a matziv or with a person that by doing so would rob the Eibishter of what he wants in this world.
That's beautiful, Mashla. I don't even really know what to add to that, but I just want to add to that personal touch, a small thing that often we look at ourselves. We could find ourselves in a situation of conflict, and you could have a moment of doubt of yourself. And you could look at yourself as a failure. Look at me. Look, I'm in this conflict, and the only way out is to, like you said, is to nullify oneself and to let myself go and not be, and I'll just give up. And I think it's a very powerful message for us individually, like you said, is that to recognize that like the saying, freedom without boundaries is anarchy. You destroy everything, and not to be so difficult, but on the contrary, like and to say it in a positive way, to recognize that who you are and what Hashem gave you, and the lot that Hashem gave you, and the conflict that you're in, it is not for you to lose your identity in, but to work within that. And that has to be it's really a message of empowerment to everybody to dig deep into their identity, to know, to know the best they can, to study, to learn, to connect with their mission on this world. And as you do that more and more, true peace will come in a place of kedusha, in a place of bittul. But until that day, you should be encouraged and strong. And this has nothing to do with hate. It has nothing to do with anger. It has to do with your own serenity and peace of mind. And it's very comforting to know that we're created differently. And that's how it's supposed to be. So everybody should be matzliach. Everybody should be successful in their min, in their species, in their personality, and who they are. And you take that to the greatest end, and you bring kedusha into it, and everything's going to be good. All right, thank you for joining us, and we'll Moshe.
L'chaim to peace, and l'chaim to good conflict.
There we go. All right, thank you for joining us. Like and subscribe, share with your friends, and we will see you next week in Mirz Hashem.
Mirz Hashem.